So I'm going to start this review by giving you a few kind of warnings before you go and see this film, or kind of a heads up, so you kind of know your expectations. And that's actually the first point I want to say is don't go into this movie expecting really any other war film you've seen before, because you might be a little bit disappointed if you're going into this expecting Saving Private Ryan or Hacksaw Ridge or Lone Survivor with Mark Wahlberg. Just any war film you've seen before, you're gonna be kind of disappointed. So just go into it with a really open mind, and I don't mean this in a bad way, okay? But I kind of was expecting a kind of war film when I went in, but I kind of learned to adapt when it got to a certain point. I was like, yeah, this is something I've never seen before. This is a very unique war film. The second thing I want to say is character depth, okay? It's not how you kind of would expect, alright? It's not one of those movies that characters kind of, sit around around a campfire or in like these trenches, bullets flying over and stuff, and they're talking about, their, before they were fighting in the war, or maybe a certain event, one of their friends got killed in the war. That's not in this movie, okay? This movie actually doesn't have that much dialogue. It's more of a visual experience. There is still dialogue here and there. It's not a silent film or anything like that. By no means, it's actually a silent film. It's not that at all. Pretty much all you're going to really know from the main character is he's young and he desperately wants to get off the beach of Dunkirk. That's basically all you really get from this main character. But that's the thing, is he's such a young person, and you just kind of feel sympathy for this guy. Well, the performance from him was really good as well, so to be honest, I thought it was kind of enough for this movie. The reason why it works for me is Christopher Nolan went for realism for this movie. He understands the fact that these people did not have time. Time is not of the essence to go and sit around and have a good old chat about, their past life and whatnot. They don't have time for that. They are trying to get the hell off this beach. And with all this realism beholds one of the best plane movies I have seen. And I gotta be honest with you, I'm not the biggest fan of warplane movies. I'm into more the skirmish battles and, the guys on the ground and, shooting at each other like that. But the plane scenes in this movie really impressed me. So that's saying something, right? And talking about the planes in this film, they're actually seen as quite scary, especially the enemy ones when they're like diving down and dropping bombs on these soldiers. It's really terrifying. And it also gives a sense of realism to these plane fight scenes, or dog fights, when they're like shooting at each other and such. You can really get a sense of patience these soldiers had to do when they're flying these planes, and it doesn't really feel like they're just like, oh yeah, bam, 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 bam. It actually looks like a really difficult task to pull off. One of the pilots in this movie is played by Tom Hardy, and he did a great job. Kind of felt sorry for him in a way, because he actually had to do another type performance. Because, he was a pilot and you have to wear the pilot mask. In fact, the whole cast in this movie did a really great job, especially Harry Styles. He actually quite surprised me. I was a little bit worried that a singer was going to be doing a role, but then, I did have a little bit of trust in Christopher Nolan, because, he surprised us with Heath Ledger, so I wasn't too worried, but I was like, a singing actor. One thing I really appreciated from the casting as well is that they gave more screen time to the younger cast members, because the main character in this movie, I've never actually seen him in any film before, and same with Harry Styles and some other younger actors as well, so I really appreciated that. Now, from what I can recall, I've never really been jump scared in a war film before. But in this movie, Dunkirk, I actually jump scared twice from things. I mean that in the best way possible. I'm not saying they're like cheap jump scares, but it was that impactful in some moments that I actually jumped. I was really impressed by that, considering this movie actually has a PG rating. There's no blood and gore in this movie. It relies instead on tension and suspense, thanks to the soundtrack as well by Hans Zimmer. In fact, I actually think Christopher Nolan originally thought of putting a ticking noise, and then he told Hans Zimmer to build a soundtrack around that. Although this movie is not just all suspense and tension, which is a good thing, because if it was just non-stop, you wouldn't have time to recover first off, and you would kind of become a little bit numb to all these suspense moments. And the last thing I want to really point out is this movie's gonna age really well, because there's not too much CGI used, because alright, today, we look at CGI and it's like, oh, that's some really good CGI, but how about 10 years from now? We'll look at today's CGI and kind of be like, it could have been better, right? But this movie uses a lot of practical effects. So, Dunkirk was a really great film. I would definitely watch it again. I don't know if I'd say it's one of the best, Christopher Nolan movies, but it's definitely up there. And I confidently think this movie's definitely going to get a spot in my top 10 movies of this year. So on that note, I'm going to give this movie a 4.5 out of 5 pieces of licorice. So that is my review of Dunkirk. And what are your thoughts on this movie? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you think it was just, it's just another war film? Love to hear your comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, consider hitting this button here or the subscribe button down below so you can see more videos I've made. And I'll catch you folks in the next one.